have Jim Bitticks on today, and he is the COO and president of Dave's Hot Chicken. We got into a lot of really good stuff, including the last statement that he made is the reason franchisors should exist and why franchisees should be around a franchisor like Dave's. It wasn't always like this, though. He has a very different grade of himself today as a C-level executive by being a franchisee and C-level versus how he would grade himself as a franchisee-focused franchisor years ago. So fascinating conversation. We got into a lot of different rabbit holes, but I think both franchisees, franchisors will really enjoy the show.
Representing Franchise Secrets, Erik Von Horn.
Jim, welcome to the show.
Hey, thank you.
Well, I had one of your franchisees on, Raj, and he's a multi-brand owner, owns a bunch of Dunkin' Donuts and some other stuff. And he mentioned that he owns a Dave's Hot Chicken. And he said something about you either on the show or before. And I'm like, wow, this CEO sounds like a franchisee-focused CEO. I'm like, I need to know this guy. So he introduced us, and here we are. So why don't you give the audience a bit of your background so they know who they're listening to, and then let's dive into it.
Sure. I've been in the restaurant industry my whole life. Started when I was 15 years old with my very first job as a Jack in the Box employee in a franchise-owned location. And have spent the entirety of my career in the quick service and fast casual restaurant space. Ended up for several years at CKE Restaurants, which is Carl's Jr. and Hardee's. Was there for 17 years and worked my way up into like the regional VP or VP of operations level. Made a jump to Blaze Pizza 10 or 12, 13 years ago. Onto the sort of franchisor side of all of the pieces, not company ops, but creating a whole brand and all of the support stuff there, which was the best thing I had ever done until I landed at Dave's Hot Chicken about 4 years ago. We started at Blaze when there were 2 locations. I left when there were 372 or so, and then started here at Dave's when there were 4 locations, and we open a 206th location tomorrow, which ironically is a franchise location that I am a partner in. I'm a franchisee now. So I started in the restaurant industry working for a franchisee, which I didn't even know what that meant when I was 15 years old. And then as of about 2.5 years ago, I became a franchisee myself of Dave's Hot Chicken. So I'm sort of double dipping into being the president and chief operating officer of Dave's while also being a franchise owner of Dave's, which is now the best experience I've ever had in my life.
I love it. I want to dive into some of that too, because perspectives of franchisees when you're at the corporate office versus when you are a franchisee. So we'll get into that at some point. Where did you grow up? Was it Southern California and that first job in Southern California, or where?
I actually grew up in Tempe, Arizona, so the Phoenix metropolitan area. So very, very hot area temperature-wise. Not a lot going on for the most part in restaurants. I think that's how I ended up at Jack in the Box. But yeah, that's where I grew up.
So Blaze, my family's a big fan of Blaze. Like we have 2 of them in Rapid City, South Dakota, which is the big city for us. Like we live in Spearfish, which is a 10,000 people. Rapid City's really big, pushing 100,000 people. 2 Blaze Pizzas. Tell us about like you were there, 2 locations, and that brand. Like give us, it's people that don't know what like the food business is like, pizza is like why do you think you guys had such great success at Blaze? Because there's some of these locations that are some of these brands that are not like around anymore or not as strong as Blaze. So give the audience some insight, because there's not a lot of food people listening to this right now.
Sure. So I joined Blaze when there were 2 locations. I had taken a meeting with the the CEO and founder, Rick Wetzel, and his wife, Elise Wetzel, founded that brand back in 2012. Took a meeting. They had 2 locations open. A friend of mine who I'd worked for years and years earlier in my career had just become their VP of franchise development. She said, we need somebody for operations. Her name's Carolyn Kennedy. And I went in for this interview, and in my mind, I had 3 kids at the time. And in my mind, I was like, there's no way I'm going to come work for a brand that has 2 restaurants. Everybody always says we're going to grow. We're going to build out this, thing. We're going to have all these locations, and, not a lot of them make it. And that's just the restaurant business. But there was something about Rick and his ability to sell. He's like the greatest salesperson you'll ever meet. And he just inspired me. It inspired me to make this change. I had 3 kids. I was really worried about the idea that I was making this jump. I was living in Austin, Texas at the time for Carl's Jr. And I made this jump back to California for way less money. There are no state income taxes in Texas. So coming to California, I think it's probably the highest state income tax state in the country. I mean, it was just a really ridiculous move. Turned out to be, up to that time, the very best thing I had ever done. The idea of helping build a brand and the experience that came with it was, it was fulfilling. It was like having started in the restaurant industry when I was 15 years old, and then landing at Blaze and helping grow it and build it and make it into this really great thing was pretty life affirming in terms of a career type thing to do. And Blaze, the idea behind Blaze, as Rick would tell you, was pizza for lunch. Up until that point, so this was 2013 when I joined Blaze, if you wanted pizza for lunch and you didn't live in New York City or work in a shopping mall where you could grab a slice at Sbarro's, you probably weren't getting pizza for lunch. Pizza's a dinner thing. It's usually a group thing. It's like we get a large pizza, and maybe sometimes we split the toppings, half with this, half without that, because you don't like it. But nobody's working in an office and ordering a large pie and having it sent up to the 27th floor and sharing it with their cube mates, if that makes sense. So the idea of individual pizzas made for an individual person for lunch was sort of a new thing. And Blaze was one of the early groups in that category, as was Mod Pizza and a few others. And that was sort of the start of a wave or a trend within the food industry. You saw a lot of fast casual, build your own pizza players jump in. It's funny when you say it that way, build your own pizza. Every pizza since the beginning of time, I think, is build your own pizza. If you think about it, I have a guy on our team here at Dave's. He's one of the founders, and he's like, isn't every pizza build your own pizza? And it is. It always has been. You've always said, I want pepperoni, olives, onions, and mushrooms, or whatever. But somehow Blaze and Mod and all these guys, by individualizing it and making it so that you come in and you build it down the line, it became its own little wave. It was huge. I think Mod got up to almost 500 locations. Blaze got up to about 400 locations, and several other brands out there, with a couple hundred locations here or there. So it was definitely a trend and one of the bigger waves in food for a while. I think now it's contracting a bit, and they may have over proliferated. You're going to end up with 1 or 2 major players. I think that survive all of the fallout, but it's still here, and it's still excellent. High quality ingredients, chef driven, really cool branding around Blaze. And it was a really fun time, more than anything, with a lot of great people that helped us build that brand. So
attention, franchisors and franchisees, there are 2 really important resources that I want to share with you that will help you avoid costly mistakes and increase your enterprise value. The first is our free Facebook group. It's a community that has over 4,000 franchisees and franchisors in it. When somebody asks a question, they get honest and authentic answers from multiple perspectives. You can join the group for free over at franchisesecrets.com/Facebook. The second resource I want to share with you is if you're a franchisor and you're frustrated that you're not awarding as many franchises as you thought you would, this is the reason I created the Franchisor Mastermind. If you want access to the information, the techniques that the best franchise sales organizations are using to award franchises, and you want what mature brands have with their playbook of having happy, successful franchisees that grow the right way, then you might want to check out the Franchisor Mastermind. The reason why people join is they want access to my Rolodex, my connections. They want the playbook to achieve both short-term and long-term success. They want to increase enterprise value in their brand. Links will be in the show notes or at scalablefranchise.com. I think a lot of people worry about fads, whether it's pizza, whether it's yogurt, pizza, and now we have chicken. And I know some brands that are not doing well in the chicken category, and there are other brands that are doing well. So in your mind, I'm sure when you were looking at Dave's, to be president and CEO there, fad had to have crossed your mind. Did it?
Very first thought.
And then for context, I think, there's a lot of different categories that can be classified as a fad. People think of, they always wonder if they're getting into a business, starting a franchise, or buying into a franchise. They wonder if it's a fad. So as you answer that, audience, there's some good nuggets in here that Jim's going to share on at least his thought process, because he's been through a cycle of this where, a lot of people haven't. So that was your first thought too, as a fad, huh?
Oh, 100%. I had only tried hot chicken once at Blaze in, I want to say 2017, maybe. We had our franchisor conference or convention in Nashville, and they had hot chicken at one of the dinners. And I was like, what is this? And, it was like super hot and it was almost unenjoyable. I like spicy food, but I was like, wow, this is really and the flavor was really bold, that it was not just hot, but really bold flavors. And I was like, yeah, not for me. It's fine, but not for me. And then one of the initial investors in Blaze Pizza, his name is Bill Phelps. He's our CEO at Dave's, and he was the CEO of Wetzel's Pretzels and a co-founder with Rick Wetzel of Wetzel's. So that the connections, they've been business partners for 30 years, doing multiple different projects and brands together. And he had jumped from Wetzel's over to start this franchise company for Dave's. And so that was my connection to him. And I reached out to him and said, congratulations. And, happy to help with anything ops. I was, at Blaze at the time, and wasn't really even thinking about making a change or doing anything. I just was trying to be nice. And I went and tried the food, and I was like, wow, this is actually really good. It was different than what I had tried in Nashville. And as a few months progressed and there was an opportunity, they didn't have somebody doing ops for Dave's. And I got really interested in the idea of coming to Dave's, but I was really afraid of the idea that it was just a fad. And I landed at some other restaurants, at some travel trip that I was on, and they had chicken tenders in 3 different flavors. They had plain, just regular chicken tenders. They had buffalo tenders, and they had Nashville hot chicken tenders. And like a light bulb went off in my head, and I said, "Oh, it's a new genre or a new flavor profile of chicken." The way that, because when I was a kid, hot wings burst onto the scene. All of a sudden, all these different places were doing hot wings or buffalo wings. I remember thinking, well, buffaloes don't even have wings. Like, that doesn't even make sense. What are buffalo wings? And it was chicken wings, obviously, but served in this buffalo sauce. And now buffalo is like every menu at any sit down restaurant you go to has some buffalo wrap, buffalo salad, buffalo wings, whatever. In the same way that teriyaki chicken also became a thing. And I don't know, late 90s. I don't remember, to be honest with you, and now you've got whole brands built on teriyaki madness, Wapag Grill. Like, any of these things are teriyaki. And I suddenly had this sort of like calming moment of oh, it's probably not a fad. It's just that chicken, which I think is the most eaten protein now in the world, is it's tentacling out into these different flavor genres that people want to try and eat because they eat so much chicken. So then I got really, really interested in the idea that I could actually make the jump By this time, I had 4 kids, and so you start thinking like, better just stick with where I'm at, And so when I made the realization that it was probably more than a fad, I went on YouTube and I started like researching. I started looking up Dave's on Google and Yelp reviews and all of these things. There were only 4 locations open at the time that it became an actual thing that I was interested in potentially doing. And I came across this video of these 2 guys trying Dave's Hot Chicken. And for your audience that probably doesn't know, Dave started as a brand that 3 guys, all high school dropouts, decided to open in a parking lot under an easy up tent with a portable fryer and an ice chest, like an igloo cooler full of chicken that they bought at Restaurant Depot. And they worked for months to like perfect this recipe. And one day they just opened up, no permits, completely unallowed. And on the 3rd day they were open, an Eater LA blogger by the name of Farley Elliott came out and tried the food. And the next day he posted an article and they had a line around the block. The first couple of days they were open, they did $40 a day in sales. On the 3rd day they were open, they had, 4th day they were open, they had a line of 100 people around the block because they got this Eater LA blog post, which by the way, was the strategy for them. They had started an Instagram account and started tagging all these food bloggers to try to get them to try. Literally, Armand Uganese is one of the founders who said, I knew if we got one blogger to come out and post that it would blow us up. So he said they used to tag every one of them. And this guy came out and it totally worked. Great strategy, by the way. And these guys on the YouTube video are in the parking lot trying the food. And you can tell they're skeptical. They're just doing it for content. And the one guy bites it and he goes like this. Like his eyes go back in the back of his head. He's like, oh my God. And then the next like minute is him using expletives to describe how good the chicken is. Oh my, like every other word's like,
and some
like
you probably didn't even know were expletives. So
yeah. I mean, and then the other guy who was like, let me try this. Like, I don't even know, like, like kind of like an attitude. He tries it and he goes, oh dude, that's juicy. That's juicy. Like they go on for 4 minutes about how good the chicken was. And that actually ended up scaring me. And I was afraid of ruining that, because how do you operationalize eyes rolling in the back of somebody's head? If that's what I'm coming in to do, to operationalize this brand and help them scale it, which is sort of like become a specialty of our little team. There are a bunch of us that were at Blaze together and several of the team that were at Wetzel's together, and sort of Wetzel's is an all franchise business. I think they're up to 350 or 400 locations. Blaze is still in the mid 300s, even post COVID. And Dave's, like I said, we're opening number 206 tomorrow. And what we've done, our specialty as a team, is to operationalize and scale these brands. And the idea of taking the eyes rolling in the back of your head moment and trying to make sure that you don't lose that, trying to not ruin it, is really was really important and very daunting. I look at that and go like, I don't know if we can do that. Like what? Like I just don't want to be the guy that screwed it up. We hear some of our franchisees. There's a brand, Moe's Southwest Grill, and I've heard a couple of franchisees say, "Please don't ruin the chicken." Moe's ruined their chicken, 10 years ago or whatever it was, and I was like, I didn't know. I don't know Moe's well enough to know what the chicken was like before. I think the chicken's good as it is. I like their product, but a lot of these folks are like, it was so good before. And people all the time say how good Dave's is. Oh, it's so good. It's so good. It's actually in our brand. It's one of the sort of like the terms that we use, so good. And so I really have been very, very like vigilant, very focused on not ruining the chicken. And it was almost the reason I didn't take the job, because I didn't want to ruin it.
When did those founders get focused on branding, and what is that branding like, and how important is brand? Because they were intentional in that, illegal shop that they had, where they got the blogger out there and they had 100 people around the line, waiting in line. but I'm looking at the branding that you have, and it's cool branding. I like it,
Yeah.
but like, give us the evolution of the branding behind Dave.
Yeah. It's a really good question. It's funny because there are three original founders, Dave, Armand, and Tommy. And Armand is we call him sort of like a Instagram genius or Instagram savant or marketing savant. And he's 32 or 33. So 7 years ago, he's in his mid-20s, and he was an avid Instagrammer. And he was also a fledgling stand-up comic. And so they launched the entire brand on Instagram, and he would take pictures of the food. And the food, when you look on the Instagram account, the food looks like messy and tasty and delicious, and just it's we say food porn, and that's almost become cliche now. But when you look at the food, just looks so eatable, like you just want to eat that. And when you ask him about it, he goes, I just made sure it looked like how it really was. Like, that's literally sort of the root of how they set it up and how he set it up. And the branding itself, like even our use of, you can see it in the background here, our use of a rubber screaming chicken or shrilling chicken dog toy as the mascot or logo. It wasn't that on purpose. They saw a rubber chicken at a Dollar Tree or something, and they bought it to be. That was the only one, and he sort of thought like, "Oh, that's funny," and we're serving chicken. We'll take that, and it sort of became the logo. That's Dave, by the way. There we have a chef, Dave, and he'll tell you he's Dave, not the chicken, and that's Dave the chicken. And so our chicken is Dave, and the branding has always been, and the brand itself has always been intentionally fun and funny because Armand is funny. He's sort of the brand soul, if you want to call it that. He's kind of like a Bart Simpson type character where he's like, funny and a good person at heart, a really good person at heart. And that's he probably won't want me saying that he's like Bart Simpson, but just that kind of like, hey, dude, like, and everything's about like just being positive and stuff. And as intentional as the images of the food were, and what the brand was supposed to be about, he'll tell you the brand is supposed to be about good food. And that's as basic as it is. When I very first started, one of the very first things I wanted to do was to lock down sort of a mission, vision, purpose, so that we could start building training material and core values. So we could start building training materials and making sure that those veins were built into what the brand was supposed to be. As we try to grow and scale a brand, you sort of want to make sure that, because it's an all franchise business, you want to make sure that each franchisee, who I'm sure has their own mission, vision, and value statements for their own companies, that they can take the Dave's brand and still be able to do it everywhere. It can't be that it changes from state to state. It's got to be something that's very self-contained. And so as we built those things, I asked both Dave and Armand, why'd you do it? What were you trying to do? And Dave said, I just really want to make good food. I love when people like my food. He was a chef, working in various kitchens, but he did some training under Thomas Keller's French Laundry. And so he was very into the food. And Armand said, I wanted to make money to help support my family, which I thought was total BS, by the way. I was just like, yeah, right. Like, that's what we all say, you know what I mean? But they're Armenian. And when you get into your mid-20s, and I guess in Armenian culture, this is what I've inferred, is that you're expected to start helping out. And so they wanted to take on some of the financial burdens of their family, like their mom and dad and brothers and sisters and whatever. And so this was actually, although I rolled my eyes at the time, what I've learned in the last 4 years is totally authentic and totally real. I think our mom, all three of them, they cover the cost of like their families. They send money back to Armenia. Like they really did what they said they wanted to do, and they were really authentically real about what they were trying to do. So when Armand says that the brand is about the food, that's really true. And everything else is sort of organically grown around that. which is sort of it's sort of a cool story. And it's the authenticity of it is what's so I guess inspiring about it.
When I first heard about you, I thought there's a franchisee-focused CEO, and you've been in franchising for a while. You spent a lot of time at Blaze, 2 stores to hundreds. What would you say were you franchisee focused back then? And if you were to grade yourself, what would you have given yourself as a grade? And then I'm going to ask you that same question again after being a franchisee.
Fair enough. So I think you just promoted me, by the way, and I appreciate the promotion. I'm only the president and chief operating officer. Bill is still our CEO. I hope to succeed him someday, but not too soon, by the way, because I love working for him, and he's opened up so many doors for me. So I just wanted to call that out. So if he hears this,
oh yeah, I don't want to get.
I want Bill to know I'm not taking CEO cred. I just want him to know. Okay, he'll beat me up. But to answer your question, I would have told you at Blaze Pizza and early on here at Dave's, I would have said I would give myself an A minus grade in franchisee focus. Like, the idea that I was focused on what franchisees find to be important, what they need to run a great business. I would have said definitely bare minimum A minus. I'd probably give myself an A, to be honest with you. And if you're asking what would I give myself now that I'm an actual franchisee, I would tell you that I was probably a B at best. As an actual franchisee, as I continue to, we're opening our 3rd store. That number 206 is our group's 3rd franchise location. My focus has sharpened 100%, if not more, as a franchisee, and my intent. I guess it's sort of like I want to be in with the in crowd. I want these franchisees and our brand to go, we love him in that role. I've had a few people ask me and say internally here, isn't that sort of a conflict of interest for you to be the president and the chief operating officer and a franchisee? Like, that seems like, that could be a little hairy. I actually think it's been a confluence of interests where I am now in parallel with them in lockstep and sort of making sure that the things that we put in or the things that we change, the things we're asking them to spend money on to build their business actually return something for them. I think differently than maybe other brands do, because my perspective is somewhat self-interested. Like, if I'm going to spend X number of dollars on connected television, I need to make sure that it's actually returning what you guys say it's going to return, and so on and so forth. So it's really changed my perspective. It's made me much more intentional, I think, about the choices that we're making, and a lot more clear about asking the right questions in group meetings with the rest of the team. Are we sure that it gives us that? Can we replicate that? What's it going to cost a real franchisee? What's it really going to return? We're all across the country. We're in Canada. We're in the Middle East, and there are different things to consider for each of those franchise groups. Of the 206 locations, us as a franchisor, we own 5. The other 201 are franchisee owned. And so the decision that we make is minimal to us, and it's maximum impact for our franchise owners. So and I get that at a high level. One of my partners, in my franchise, is our CFO, and I think he would tell you the same thing, that as focused as he is on sharpening his pencil and keeping things tight, it's changed his perspective in a great way. One of our other C-suite folks, our chief development officer, she's also a franchisee, and she'll tell you it's a night and day difference from what it was for her before as well. Also, for several of us, we've included people on our teams as investors in our individual franchises, and I think they have all grown a lot as franchise servants of franchisees, or servers of our franchise culture. and it's made a big impact.
Let's kind of flip that question around, because now you have an understanding of what it's like to be on the franchisee side, and we can use Dave's or Blaze or just any generic franchise system. But what do you wish the franchisees knew about the franchisor side? Because they're not on the franchisor side; they're on the franchisee side right now. But you're in both. What do you wish that they knew about the franchisor side?
Sure. So I'll tell you that I believe that when you're an honest or ethical person in general, that the decisions you make, you can stand on. You can stand up in front of a group. You can answer questions. And I've always tried, before being a franchisee at Blaze, I've always tried to make good decisions. Who doesn't? I've never gone out and said, I want to make some bad decisions today that cost people a lot of money. But I'll use an example. I'll use some examples from Blaze, just aggregated into one sort of thing. A lot of times at Blaze, we make choices or decisions for the greater group of franchisees, not very specific. And a lot of franchisees would be like, well, that's ruining this aspect of the brand or whatever. And then you sort of take them through, well, here's why we did it. And if you explain it and you sort of give them the detail, I would tell you 9 times out of 10, maybe more, they agreed with the decision. They'd say, okay, I get it. Yeah, it makes sense to me. I understand where that's coming from now. And I think that we did it at Blaze, and I think we're doing it at Dave's, where we do make decisions that way. We do think that way. We are able to stand up in front of a crowd and answer the questions, very, with our heads held high, as if we're making good decisions. And I'm here as well. People 9 or 9.5 times out of 10 agree and understand where that decision is coming from. What I would ask maybe franchisees to consider more sometimes is just sort of the aspects of the larger brand perspective. Franchisees who operate in I have one franchisee that doesn't want to use branded fry boats because they believe that those aren't necessary, and it's just adding cost. Okay, maybe it's intended to actually reduce cost because the portioning is more consistent and yada yada yada. But because everything's so interconnected now, when you see images on Instagram through the story and whatever, you can tell when restaurants aren't doing what they're supposed to be doing. You can see when fry portions are underportioned, or when they're not using the boats, or when somebody went and bought a different type of bun at the grocery store because they probably ran out, or and so it isn't just in this small market. It doesn't only affect this small market. It affects the brand as a whole. And when we're putting together a brand that we're going to continue to grow, and who knows how many units we'll get to, you sort of want the work, the body of work, to be very consistent. You definitely want the body of work to be really consistent as you grow it. And that's the part that I think sometimes franchisees get sort of micro focused on their own little world and don't necessarily understand, especially today, especially as everything's so integrated on Instagram and TikTok and all the social media, how much a thing they do in their one little market might affect the whole brand. And it's not major impacts. It's not like it's ruining the brand. Like, this doesn't really have any impact on the brand. Yeah, you're right. It's not touching the sales of the brand. It's not damaging the brand. But there is a cohesiveness to the brand, and that's sort of one of the risks in franchising. One of the strengths in franchising is you've got these targeted franchise owners that know their markets, have been doing business there for decades. We target multi-unit, multi-brand, high-level franchisees that are well capitalized, and they're not taking a mortgage against their house to build their one Dave's Hot Chicken we gave them. They're doing 5, 10, 15, 20 store deals. They're doing large territories, and they've got the experience, or they've got the experienced operator behind them that's done it, that owns a stake of the business, that's helping them grow that brand. And within that context, there needs to be an understanding that the brand is going to get even bigger and bigger and bigger, and it's got to hold together. It's not a mom and pop. You're doing a franchise business because you want the menu and the branding and all of the pieces sort of to be turnkey. You're not figuring it out as you go, and so there's that push and pull on the franchise side. You get these great targeted market experts that can grow your brand really fast, but at the same time, they've been very successful. They probably have a little bit of a rebellious streak in them, like that maverick. They're probably one of the more successful people in their high school or college class. They're probably, in all honesty, they're all millionaires. Okay, so there's a lot of that, like, hey, I know what I'm doing, and I've built this business. I've been in this business for 25 years. We don't need fry boats. Like, that's not your call.
So how does the franchisor talk to that franchisee? Because I've been that franchisee. On the franchisor side, I've seen those franchisees. So I've been that franchisee and I've seen those franchisees on the franchisor side. What's the best way for a franchisor to handle that situation? Because it may be someone that's posting stuff on social media that they shouldn't. It's not going to impact the brand. It may be somebody that's doing some marketing collateral that isn't consistent with the brand. So how, like you said, it's not going to destroy the brand, but, franchisees should be thinking, do I want my other neighboring franchisees to be doing things that I don't like? Even though I'm okay with this one thing that's off-brand, do I really want my neighbor to be doing something that's off-brand that I don't like? They think it's good, but I don't think it's good. And then it just gets worse from there. So from a franchisor's perspective, how do you work with franchisees to address things like that?
Yeah. So what we try to do at Blaze, and even more so at Dave's, is we try to establish really good relationships. Like I said a few minutes ago, the idea that I can explain to you the thinking behind why this is important, and making sure that we've built the thinking that, as we roll something out or as we make decisions, that it's really solid. Like, the foundation of why we're doing it is really real. It's not just because we like it or we want to. It's sort of like, okay, well, these are the 5 reasons we decided to do this, and this is sort of what we do. And then sometimes there are hard conversations. We were a little bit, in my opinion, probably, I don't want to say too lenient, but maybe overly willing to bend at Blaze and sort of go along with what the franchisee wanted. We had an internal objective of becoming the unfranchisor, or rebuilding or recasting franchisee-franchisor relationships, which I think was a very noble goal. And I loved being part of that culture and that idea. Here at Dave's, we've been a little bit more, I think we're still doing that. I think we still have really good relationships. We're really willing to listen. One of those core values that I talked about was include and respect our partners. And within our partners, we're talking about franchise owners, we're talking about vendors, we're talking about employees. And so it is built into us. And so I think we're good listeners, and I think we try really hard to include them. But at the end of the day, ultimately, we're the keepers of the brand. And there are very few occasions where we have to flex our muscle. It's usually good enough to have a pretty direct conversation with the franchisee. Again, multi-unit, multi-brand franchisees get it because they've done it before. And most people say that we're really very good to work with compared to ex-franchisor that they worked with before. So I haven't really found a lot of situations where we run into too much trouble to get to it. We had actually one here where a franchisee was really adamant about building the restaurant differently than we were recommending, and we landed on no. You can't do it that way. You got to do it this way. And they weren't happy, and we didn't bend on it. We didn't cave. As much as I want to give people what they want, at the same time, this was their very first restaurant. They hadn't even gone through training yet. I was like, listen, you're gonna just have to trust me. This is what you guys bought in the franchise, and I'm not saying yes to this adaptation or this change. They got pretty frustrated, but they went with it. Afterwards, they said, you know what, you guys were right. This was the right thing to do. And so we've done that multiple times. There have been a lot of franchisees that have sort of wanted to over proliferate and open restaurants too close to each other. And we know based on the experience of the last 4 years that we need to be a little more spaced out. And we've said no. We had a franchisee at our last conference stand up in front of the entire group, which was like 350 people, and say, I just want to say thank you to the team for telling me no. It was one of those moments that could bring a tear to your eyes, if you were willing to allow it. The older I get, the more tears I find I'm willing to shed. But it was one of those where you're like, yes, that worked, And so I think we're in a position where you just say no if you absolutely have to say no. And ultimately, again, if you can explain the decision and the logic, to go with it. And so that's my answer. Like, you just tell them no.
So on the flip side, you mentioned, both at both companies, you have large, successful, multi-brand, multi-unit franchisees. What are some of the things that you've learned from them, as they bring an idea to you, or maybe it's operational type stuff? Like, over the years, what have you found a lot of value in from these, successful franchisees?
Yeah, probably too many to count, to be honest with you. One that comes immediately to mind at Blaze Pizza was a franchisee who had been a Yum franchisee and was really focused on the cheese portioning and how we're doing the cheese portioning. And essentially, we ended up adapting or adopting his suggestion, and it became the law of the land, if you want to call it that, or the standard for the whole brand. Franchisees in new markets often understand their markets much better than we do from California. And so another franchisee brought to us that for Blaze again, that we needed a little bit of understanding and explanation built into the menu about how it was supposed to be. You can't just tell people it's the Chipotle of pizza. They need a little bit more, especially when people first walk in and they see a menu board with a price that's like $7.45. In pizza world, that's the base price, and then every topping's $1 or $2 or whatever. And so, in different markets where Blaze and brands like Blaze hadn't entered yet, a lot of folks were thinking they were coming in, they're going to buy a $12 individual pizza. And this is, 10 or 12 years ago, not in the world today where it's now a $12 pizza. This was, a long time ago. And so we adapted the menu for that. There are so many that you hear along the way, and then you go, okay, let me take a look at that. And then once you take a look at it, you find that there's some real value to it. And I think our team has been really good about listening to that stuff. Because I came up through the restaurants, I mentioned it earlier, but I started in the business when I was 15, and I often found along the way that doing it every day gives you a perspective that the leaders at the corporate office, whether that was at Carl's or anywhere else I've ever worked, they did this 20 years ago. They don't know this today, and so someone's got to speak up and say something. And so I value the feedback from the team, from the operators. In my franchise group, I have an operator. She runs our 3 locations. Her name's Olivia. And anything we're testing, I always put it into at least one of our stores. And then I call her or I text her off to the side and go, hey, tell me the truth on the new Dave's Bites. Easy, hard. And she's always been, I've worked with her now. I worked with her at Carl's. I brought her to Blaze, and she's here at Dave's with us now. And I take her feedback to be sacrosanct. Like, if she says it works, I believe it. And if she says, I think we need to fix this, then I come back to our team and I go, what about this? Like, how do we fix that? And I have an excellent team. And all my team is operators. All my team comes from the restaurants. Everybody on my team is somebody that like worked their way up. And so I think they all value that, but I also think they all are hands-on types of people. And they go into the restaurants, they listen to the feedback, and we've got, I think, a good enough communication flow between us and them and the people in our restaurants that we've learned a lot, and we continue to learn a lot from them, and we're open to what they say. It comes back to that value of include and respect our partner. We literally, like there are 4 keywords under that. One of them is listen. And so we do listen, and one of them is collaborate. And we do collaborate with our franchisees. So
one last question for you. So what is the best mindset and approach for a franchisee that wants to do something different in a market, or in their location? So mindset.
Yeah. I mean, all we ask is that they ask. All we, there are brand considerations. There are things as a brand that we want to make sure that we're at least aware of and in control of, or able to say yes or no. We had a franchisee that wanted to do some billboards in their market, and the messaging they wanted to use was what we consider to be off-brand. And so, they sent in what they wanted to do, and ultimately we worked with them and came up with something that satisfied what their goal was, but also stayed brand appropriate. So we do want to work with them to make their business very successful. We're always talking about how we make the business better for the franchisees. And so in doing that, we've positioned ourselves. I'm a big believer in servant leadership, and Howard Bayar, who is the president of Starbucks, I got to see him speak once, and I also read a couple of his books, and I just loved the idea that he who sweeps the floor chooses the broom, I think, is one of the memes I see him post on LinkedIn all the time, and that sort of encapsulates it for me. Like, if you're the guy that's got to do the work, then I need to listen to you about how the work should be done or how the work is best done. I think I or my team, we bring the experience of understanding how it fits into the brand, but our job then is to sort of synthesize the two. So what that franchisee is looking to do, what problem are they trying to solve, or what's their goal in whatever they're asking for, and then we figure out how we make those two mesh. And I think that's a winning approach. I think that's why we've been able to scale the brands that we've been involved in. And when I say we, I mean like my team and I. My team and I have been together. Most of my team and I have been together since Carl's. So as we helped open this expansion market in Texas for Carl's years ago, and then we went to Blaze. And when you start in any of these brands early, not everybody comes at the beginning because you don't have the revenue. You can't afford to bring a team of 10 or whatever. But as we grow, okay, that's the next one in, that's the next one in. So there's probably 20 of us that have worked together for sure for the last 2 brands, probably 10 of us that were at the brand before that. And so we all have that sort of attitude and tone, and we've all come up through the restaurants for years and years together. So all we ask is that they ask, and then we work with them to try to get somewhere that's good for both.
Well, franchisees, I think it's clear. If you're entrepreneurs and you're in a franchise system, and sometimes those things seem to butt heads. But if you go in with that collaborative approach and look for a win-win situation and be prepared for a no, or maybe not now, I think that's going to best serve everyone. And franchisors, be open to listening to what your franchisees are saying out there, and the things that they might, ideas that they might have might be, actually really good, appropriate ideas that could change the way that your franchise system, actually works. So. Jim, any last bits of wisdom before I let you go?
Yeah, just to add on to what you just said, I think the main and most important idea for franchisors to connect with is the idea that the business has to be profitable. That's the only reason the franchisee is there. The franchisee has some money, they want to invest it so they can make more money. And if the business that you're proposing to them or creating for them isn't making them more money, then why are they there? So those two goals, their goal to make money and yours to help them make money, have to be very aligned, I think, to have a really successful franchise system. And so I think that's the most important thing. At Dave's, we are very, very focused on maintaining that excellent store level economic model, so that franchisees continue to be successful. And I think that's why we've been able to grow really, really fast, because the model is good, and we are very focused on keeping that model strong. And any franchisor ought to be doing that same thing to really grow something. strong and solid.
That's well said, and I can't say it any better, and that's why I wanted you on the podcast. Thanks for coming on.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Franchise Secrets podcast. Links to everything can be found over at franchisesecrets.com. And if you want my help with anything from starting your own franchise to growing your current franchise business, please visit scalablefranchise.com.